Stop the Chaos, Chapter 2. Crossing the line into addiction. We may have heard others say that they drank or drugged for years without harmful consequences of their use. Then one day, somehow they crossed over the line. They become unable to control their chemical use. Crossing the line is when our brains adapt to our chemical use and override our rational or reasonable thought processes. The chemical use reward sequence that leads to the euphoria in the pleasure center becomes hardwired or imprinted in our brains. Once this occurs, normal drinking and social drug use are impossible. We've crossed the line into addiction. We're no longer able to control our use. People who are chemically dependent do not crave particular drugs, but rather they crave the euphoria that a drug produces. While each of us may have had our favorite drug, we're actually addicted to the feeling of intoxication. This means that we can become easily addicted to any mood-altering drug. If we find ourselves addicted to one chemical, we will not be able to replace it with controlled use of another chemical. When we decide to stop using, we must decide to stop using all mood-altering chemicals. Personal stories. Elaine had been in a chemical dependency treatment center for addiction to cocaine. She had never experienced consequences for alcohol use, so after she got out of treatment, she began to drink periodically. Within a short amount of time, she noticed that her drinking had escalated. She soon found that she could no longer control her alcohol use. Elaine recognized that she had now become dependent to alcohol. Elaine found that she was susceptible to other mood-altering drugs. It would not be unusual to learn that alcohol use led Elaine back to her drug of choice, cocaine. Chemicals lower our inhibition. One of our inhibitions is to avoid our drug of choice. Addiction is progressive, terminal disease. Left unchecked, our addiction can take our lives, either through accident or from physical complications. As we start to look at our drug and alcohol use, we believe it's unlikely that we could ever get that bad. What we may overlook is the progressive nature of our illness. Our alcohol and drug use becomes progressively worse over time. As we build up tolerance to alcohol and drugs, we have to use more chemicals to get our high. The higher the level of toxic mood-altering chemicals in our body, the more damage that is done to our organs and our nervous system. Our liver, for example, has a harder time detoxifying our chemicals. We no longer function in a normal manner. Our health starts to deteriorate. Though we try to control our use, our consumption rises. Even if we stop using for a period, we quickly end up back where we left off. Some of us who return to using find we're worse off than when we stopped. It's as if the disease kept progressing even though we had stopped our using. Progression makes our addiction that much more dangerous. The automatic recall of emotions and memories makes staying sober more difficult. We have heard of Vietnam veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorder. A classic example would be a veteran who's walking down the street and hears a car backfire. He immediately perceives the noises incoming artillery and throws himself on the ground. Overwhelmed by flashback of past feelings and emotions that seemingly came out of nowhere. This situation illustrates the automatic activation of past emotions and memories from some unexpected trigger. We may have experienced this ourselves. Hearing a song we listened to on our first date can immediately bring back nostalgic memories and perhaps a tear. Or the smell of fresh baked goods may trigger memories of Grandma's house and the warmth and safety there. Automatic triggers can bring back memories and feelings of our using experiences. Our bodies may also react to these triggers. Many alcoholics and drug addicts salivate while watching a chilled beer in a TV commercial, or experience an intense craving while watching drug scenes in a movie. What situations or people trigger using urges for you? Try to identify as many situations or people as possible. Write them on the lines in the box that starts below and continues onto the next page. Okay. So, triggers. So we have situations and people. Triggers using urges. So I have situations as a very exhausting or busy day, feeling negative, lonely, empty, feeling under or overstimulated, reliving emotions, sudden changes going out of comfort zone people, being around people I have trauma surrounding. And then pressure to join society, work, gatherings, places, people, and things when I'm not feeling in the mood. When I'm feeling internal. When I'm feeling internal. Or pressured to go take on a certain role and function as I'm expected for the role or job. Thinking versus the limbic system. It's just knowing that we're an addict or alcoholic enough to keep us from using. Experience shows that knowledge that we're addicted will not stop us from drinking or drugging. The thinking portion of our brains may tell us that we shouldn't drink, but the automatic recall of memories and emotions combined with the hardwiring of the brain will override those thoughts. Many addicts and alcoholics who quit using are surprised by the profound intensity of the urge to return to chemical use. The idea that they were dependent and could not use chemicals seemed to vanish. When confronted with the using urge, the knowledge alone that we're an alcoholic or addict to drugs will not prevent us from using again. Remember, addiction is not a matter of strength or moral character. It's not about being weak or bad. Addiction is a complex illness. Our brains adapt to our chemical use by allowing drugs and alcohol to influence the production of neurotransmitters, the natural feel-good chemicals of the brain. Once our brains stop producing these chemicals on our own, we've crossed the line into addiction. The hardwiring of our brains and the automatic recall of emotions and memories ensure that we cannot rely on rational thinking to keep us from drinking. Chapter 3. Am I ready for recovery? Mind, body, spirit. How do we know if we're ready to recover? We may have agonized over whether to stop using alcohol and other drugs, but stopping our chemical use is not the hard set. It's not the hardest part. Like the smoker who says, quitting is no big deal. I've quit hundreds of times. The person addicted to alcohol or other drugs has the most difficulty staying off mood-altering chemicals. Maintaining our abstinence requires serious personal changes. What does recovery mean? For our purposes, to recover means to restore ourselves to a healthy emotional, physical, and spiritual condition, free of alcohol and other mood-altering drugs. We seek to reclaim the life we've lost through our addiction. Recovery is the process of returning to a healthy and a fulfilling lifestyle. Recovery is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. Recovery from addiction encompasses stopping our chemical use completely, admitting we were powerless over our addiction, understanding we have a chronic illness, making the necessary changes in our lifestyle, asking others for help, being patient. After we have decided to recover, the first step is to stop using all mood-altering chemicals, including alcohol. When we stop using, we begin detoxifying our bodies. As the body gets rid of toxins or poisonous chemicals and begins to rebalance itself, we experience uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms. Our experiences during withdrawal depend on the drug we're withdrawing from and how much we're used to taking. Withdrawing from certain chemicals can be mild and hardly noticeable. Withdrawal can also create severe, life-threatening reactions. We need time to adjust to the absence of chemicals. This detoxification period can be only a few days, as with alcohol, or much longer, as with drugs such as benzodiazepines, Valium, Xanax, Klonopin. If we're taking a prescribed medication, we can check with our doctor to determine whether it's mood-altering. It's important not to stop the use of prescribed medication without the approval of a physician. We should never try to detoxify alone. Alcoholics and addicts can die during withdrawal. The wisest course of action is to seek a professional care from a treatment facility or a physician who is familiar with detoxification from mood-altering chemicals. We may need medications to prevent seizures or to slowly detoxify our bodies. A medically supervised withdrawal is the best way to ensure safety and to avoid suffering from unnecessary symptoms. Once we are stable, we can embark on our journey. It's difficult to accept that we've encountered something we can't control. The admission is crucial. Until we can accept on a daily basis that we can't control our drug and alcohol use, we are doomed to repeat failed attempts at controlled use. When we don't accept our condition, we deny or minimize the amount of effort needed to maintain our recovery. We invite trouble by using intellectual processes to analyze and to understand our addiction. We assume that our newly found knowledge will overcome our old thinking and behavior. When we stop chemical use, our lives and our thinking are still programmed to enable alcohol and other drug use. These old patterns are not erased easily and can return automatically. Addiction is forever. It's neither a moral weakness nor a matter of willpower. Addiction is about brain neurochemistry and adaptations our bodies make to our chemical use. The illness of addiction is chronic. It's ongoing and with us for life. Just hoping it will go away doesn't work. Our addiction has a biological basis. Some refer to addiction as a disease or an illness. Just as diabetics have to monitor their chronic condition on a daily basis to avoid a reoccurrence of diabetic symptoms, the alcoholic and addict need to monitor their chronic condition on a daily basis. If we ignore our addiction, we will once again experience the symptoms of chemical use. Irrational thinking and behavior, a return to chemical use, can follow quickly. We'd prefer to stop our chemical use without having to make many lifestyle changes. We picture ourselves going back to a normal lifestyle. We forget that lifestyle we were leading was anything but normal. Lifestyle changes may be the most difficult part of recovery. Personal stories. Alicia had made a commitment to her counselor to stop her alcohol use. She quickly found, however, that many of her social activities revolved around drinking. Alicia decided to continue socializing with her old friends and just not use alcohol or other drugs. After all, she had made a promise to her counselor and knew that her chemical use had brought her nothing but problems. Soon after, while attending a party, Alicia began to listen to friends who tried to persuade her that she was not really an alcoholic, and she decided that she would have only a few drinks. That night, Alicia ended up arrested for driving while intoxicated. Alicia believed that she could safely continue her contact with people who abused drugs and alcohol. She believed that she could choose whether to drink. All of us in recovery need to change the direction of our lives. Our old lifestyle won't keep us sober. We need to find new outlets for our time and activities that don't include mood-altering chemicals. Necessary changes may involve staying out of bars, clubs, and liquor stores, staying away from old using friends and others who abuse alcohol and drugs, not contacting our drug source for any reason. Throw those telephone numbers away. Keep away from areas where we know drugs are available. Not keeping alcohol or other mood-altering drugs around the home or office. When we're using drugs and alcohol, we frequently thought we knew all the answers. We believed we were in control of our lives. In early recovery, we realized that our chemical use dictated our lifestyle. We used chemicals to get through life. We discover we're lacking basic coping skills and the knowledge needed to get through this period. We have difficulty dealing with normal life issues, much less with the wreckage of our addiction. Our insides shout that somehow we must accomplish our recovery by ourselves. We see asking for help or discussing feelings as an admission of weakness. We soon discover, however, that we can't stay sober alone. We need to acknowledge the importance of getting strength and guidance from others in recovery. We need to acknowledge that they know more about recovery than we do. Recovering people become the most powerful tool we have in recovery. We can use this tool in important ways. We can share our thoughts and feelings with others recovering. It's so sad the turmoil that people who are in addiction live in. And then also, when you're in recovery, thinking about the people out there, people that you know and love who are close to you. They could be your family, your friends. And also thinking about the condition of the world and how drugs are affecting people. It's not just a physical addiction. It's emotional. It's spiritual. It makes me really sad. When I read this, I realize how sick people are when they're overtaken by addiction, and how vulnerable they are when they're first in recovery. And how abused people who've become addicted. How much abuse people who are addicted take. I believe one of the reasons people become so preoccupied with drugs, the limbic system, the stem in their brain, tells them they need that as it's a natural reaction to everything they do and feel, is they just want to go, they need to go get high and they need to get more drugs. And so the preoccupation becomes all about that. That's all they see. A person who's addicted, all they see, and all the thoughts they have in the day, it's like probably 94% of it is just around getting their next high. With that being said, people who are on drugs, they can tune out everything else that's happening in their body, in their spirit, in their mind, and everything on the outside of their body. They tune out all the pain, because the decisions that they make and the circumstances that they're living in, and now that they're on drugs, it's become unmanageable and it's horrible, and it's kind of like they're getting whipped. It's like everything in their life is falling apart, and the body just becomes addicted to every time something is, they're aware of a pain or another part of their life. It's like they're still experiencing all the pain from that, but they have no response to it. No, they're not. It's like a baby just being able to hear and see everything going on around them. But they can't speak, they can't walk, they can't sit, they can't make it stop. And the only thing they can do is cry and go, and then so the person who is addicted to drugs, they're aware of like the horrible circumstances they're living in, and it's very painful, and it attacks their spirit and their mind, and Satan works in that to abuse and destroy the vulnerable, and the body just reacts to making them need to go get that chemical. That's it, and it's very very painful death. You become completely terminal in addiction. Addicts have the ability to turn this around if they do it before they end up dead, or before their soul is taken and they become overridden with their choices, and the damage becomes so severe that they've hurt someone else. They've become a psycho, a killer, a rapist, that they've done permanent severe damage, that they've destroyed their brain to where they no longer have, it's irreversible, the damage. It's like they've completely left their body, and it's like Chucky running around. It's like very scary. And there's people that are in prison now, that they've done the most horrible things, that just like, and not only that the damage that they've done to their mind and their body is irreversible. They're stuck in a permanent psychotic state, if not absent completely, and a vegetable. And the addict has a chance. I want to make sure that the addict has a chance before irreversible damage is done to detox and to get back control of their mind, their body, and their spirit. The evil will no longer dwell in them, and God will fill them. I pray that the addict who's not saved becomes saved. That they find a connection with their higher power. I pray that every addict finds Jesus Christ, and they know the love of God, and that they know the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. That nothing that they've done hasn't been paid by Jesus Christ giving his life for the sinner on that cross. And how much that they're loved. That while they were still sinners, before the sin was even thought of being committed, Jesus already paid that debt. There's no shame that you can carry around that Jesus didn't die on that cross and that debt is paid. And all that I want is for you to be saved before you've destroyed your body and your soul has been taken and you're not in control any longer. Before irreversible damage has been done. I have friends and I have people in my life. My children's father has been in prison for 15 years. He did irreversible damage. He hurts someone so severely. And because of the permanent damage to his brain, he will never be released back into society again. He didn't choose to be an addict. Because I knew him before. I knew him when we were just 13 years old. And it is the saddest thing watching a person go into a terminal state. When you become addicted, you're physically dependent on the chemicals. And then as the chemicals poison you, you no longer have any control over the decisions that you make. That you're not even making decisions anymore. When you consume poison, it poisons you. And all that comes out of you is poison. Your body is now a vessel to poison everything and everyone around you. You are not even in there anymore. It hurts so bad to lose someone who's still alive. And I fought until the day that he was put into prison to save him. He was the father of both of my children. And I know how important it is for children to have a father. All I wanted was for my best friend to be saved. And I remember when I was 18 years old, we were staying in an apartment building, but we snuck in and we were living in the stairwell, and I used to talk about Jesus all the time. I didn't even know I was talking about Jesus. I talked about Jesus so much that finally he asked me when we were sitting there to tell him about Jesus. And I did. And I think there's a possibility that that he's a believer and that he knows that he knows who God is. And that I pray that for him, that when he's that if he's not in his body, that he knows that God is there in his body. And I hope that he's not scared. And I pray for healing, because if he doesn't heal, then that's one of God's children that's gone. And then how can he ever make amends for anything that he's done? If he's dead, physically, if he's mentally, spiritually dead, then what he did is final. He can not make amends to anything that he's done. The addict, as long as they're still alive, they have a chance to recover. And there's always you can turn this around. The addict can turn this around. You have to become unphysically addicted. They say the first step is admitting you have a problem. And the second step is detoxing. When you're physically addicted, you need help detoxing because your body's on autopilot. I pray when I read this book, it takes me back. It takes me back to 15 years ago when I was a teenager and a young adult. And as I read this book, I pray for the addict who's still struggling. And I believe in the program, it says that we stay in the program because we're always addicts. And to carry the message to the addicts still suffering. I don't want to see anybody walking around this world lost. And physically there and mentally gone. Because when you're absent from your body, Satan's going to step in. He's going to use your body to cause all the damage that you can cause. Satan does that to hurt God, to destroy the light in this world. He will use you to hurt, destroy, kill, rape, steal, abuse, to be a plague on this earth. What kills me is that young people who are barely teenagers become physically addicted to drugs. They're just innocent, sweet children who are being destroyed by Satan. Satan puts that temptation there. And Satan is destroying the world. These beautiful young people, they don't realize all the potential that they have. They don't know what they're doing. When you do drugs, you've just signed a paper, you've signed your soul over to the devil. People studied this a long time, and they understand the science of addiction. They understand the science of how you become addicted and what addiction does to you. And they understand the science to reverse the effects of addiction and to get you back to sanity, a sound mind, and a healthy body, to be spiritually healed and to understand the spiritual battle in this world. That you want to be saved. You want to be you want to understand salvation and eternity and the love that God has for you and the love that God wants you to give to others. The unity that is so important to help each other in this life and to prepare for eternity. That you might think that this is a really bad day and that you need to go take poison to get a euphoric feeling. You've just poisoned yourself for the whole day. And now you are working on becoming physically addicted. So you can continue to poison yourself. And the poison makes you feel good. But there's going to come a time that you're poisoned. And that you're going to just start spewing poison from your body. Addiction isn't a personal problem. It once you are poisoned, you lose control, and now it's a problem for everyone else because you're now going to start poisoning everyone else. Spiritually, it's going to hurt our unity spiritually. You're going to start doing things to hurt people, other people, because you're so poisoned now that you're not in control of your ship. You have another captain sailing your ship, and his name's Satan. And I pray that when you become a poison zombie, that someone will take your body and put you in a safe place where you can't have those drugs anymore, and that you can't go and hurt people. And then I pray that the damage to your body is reversible, that you don't have permanent loss of function of your body and your soul. And I pray that if your body's gone, that you're still alive in there, and that the evil that has corrupted your body isn't inside of you, abusing you and torturing you. And I pray that before you become addicted, that you knew the love of God, that I pray for every person who has lost his mind and his body, that you're taken somewhere, and you're and that God is now inside of you, trying to heal you and save you and fight you from Satan. Because I don't know what happens to a person when they're in a vegetative state, except that they're not driving their ship anymore. The Satan's driving their ship. Because I've never seen an addict who's lost control of their body out doing good things, their mind and their soul. They're just poisoned, and they spew poison. And that's really deep. And so when you think about it, if you have an addiction, I hope that maybe for a minute you felt hope, that you can become well again, because you don't want to be that bad off. Because if you are saved from that state, you want to hope and pray that you haven't hurt the people, that you haven't hurt people who were close to you, and that you haven't went out and hurt strangers, mothers, fathers, brothers, uncles, aunts, grandmas. You would hate to wake up out of your vegetative state and realize that you've hurt, raped, and killed people, and that you've destroyed lives. Especially when you're a child, you can't even think. You can't even think for yourselves yet. And so it's so easy for you to become controlled by addiction, because you can't reason with yourself, especially after you put the poison in your body. You don't have the mind capacity and the strength to even discern what's going on with you. I pray for the addict that's still suffering, that this addiction is taken from them. Nobody consciously will want to live with knowing that they hurt somebody, that they've really, really hurt somebody. So I pray that they have a place for an addict. I pray that when an addict who's in a vegetative state is taken and incarcerated, because usually they're taken and incarcerated, if they haven't died yet, they're taken and incarcerated because they've committed a horrendous crime. And I pray that there's angels working in the prison system, like a special forces unit, that take these bodies with these souls in them. And they have a place, a healing room, a place where they can be kept off the chemicals, and that they can be lifted up by the hand of God to become well again. I pray that by God's hands, by the doctors, the angels that He's appointed, they can fix their brains, they can put their bodies back together, that they can restore their souls and restore their mind to sanity. But I never want to see an addict get that far, to lose control of their body and their mind and their soul. I want to tell the addict that if you can still think, if you still are thinking you have any goodness inside of you, detox from these chemicals. And after you detox, it's going to take a while for your body and your mind and your emotions to balance out. And 1, don't pick up. And 2, don't do anything. If you have to tell yourself every thought that you have, I don't want to do anything to hurt anybody. I'm not going to go run out in the middle of the road. I'm not going to go in a store and try to rob somebody or lose control of myself or my emotions. I'm not going to let Satan talk me into doing some impulse, because you're detoxing. You're not. So you're you've just chosen not to do these chemicals. You're coming off of them. Maybe you're coming off of them slowly. You're trying to do it yourself. You should seek professional help. But if you're coming off of them, if you're trying to do this yourself, you're coming off of it slowly. There's moments where you're not getting that chemical anymore, and your mind and your body is used to having that. So there might be times where you're completely blacked out because your brain is not producing the chemical that you've got your brain used to receiving that chemical from you using drugs. So you're not using drugs no more. So it's like you go brain dead at times. And the next thing you know, you can wake up and you're sitting there holding a knife. You've got someone held hostage. You're like out in the middle of the street, running around crazy, jumping in front of cars. Like you're not safe. And I'm going to tell you, in those moments where you're not in control, Satan's going to jump in that ship to take control of you. And he's going to try to destroy you and destroy everyone else using your body, using your mind. I have seen it firsthand. I have seen people I love destroyed and watch them destroy other people. Satanistic attacks to destroy, like dropping a bomb and murdering a whole village. It's like when they drop a bomb from the sky and it blows up a whole village. It's the scariest thing you could ever imagine. And see, the thing is that people who know you are spiritually connected to you. So it's not only what you do to other people physically, it's that people in your community spiritually feel the attacks from Satan, because we're all so connected to each other that we feel Satan in our bodies, in our spirits. When people are under Satan attacks, it destroys us all. And we all have weaknesses that Satan preys on, and then he be all preying on us at the same time. Evil. There's enough evil in this world. You need to be in your right sound mind to stop that, to not let that, to not let it use you to do its work of destruction. So a lot of young people and young adults and adults, they aren't spiritually awake until they've been spiritually abused. And I want to share the love of God to everyone I can. And I also want to spread the message to the addict that you need to reverse the addiction before it's too late. Nobody wants to live in eternal hell, to be tortured in a vegetative state. And that's why it's so important to me that I'm going to read this book with you guys. This book helped me in 2017. I went to groups at Community Psychiatric Clinic. I went to groups with other addicts who were struggling. And personally, I was awakened early in my addiction to understand that Satan is there, and I realized we were all under spiritual attacks, and I wasn't no better than anyone else, and I didn't want Satan to use me, and I dropped my pride, and I went to these groups, and I love the people in them groups so much. I wanted every one of us to get saved. I still do. When you have control of your mind and your body, there's less chance that you're going to become under Satan's attacks. Satan's attacks are very painful. It's like eternal hell inside your body. And then what you do, the fire that he causes, the mess in your body, it soon spreads outward to other people. And it's like a forest fire. It's ignited and it spreads really quick. And Satan wants to take over the whole earth and spread his evil. And he will use you. Don't put your body on autopilot and controlled by poison. Don't poison your body to where you can't function anymore and Satan jumps in there and starts driving it. 'Cause he will. I grew up in a place of sick people. They were sick. I grew up around a lot of sick people in a city. And there's communities all over this world of sick people where the highest percent of the community are all addicted and they're all sick. And it's like they don't have much of a chance. And there has to be a program. There has to be reprogramming. There has to be reprogramming to try to reach these people before it's too late. And so this is a book that I believe in. It's called Stop the Chaos: How to Get Control of Your Life by Beating Alcohol and Drugs. It was really hard for me to read this chapter because the shame that people carry around, it is hard for them to ask others for help. When you realize that you're body's dependent on drugs, that you have no choice in your body needing the chemical, that you in your addiction, you may not be able to get control of yourself. Asking others for help. When we're using drugs and alcohol, we frequently thought we knew all the answers. We believed we were in control of our lives. In early recovery, we realized that our chemical use dictated our lifestyle. We used chemicals to get through life. We discover we're lacking basic coping skills and the knowledge needed to get through this period. We have difficulty dealing with normal life issues, much less with the wreckage of our addiction. Our insides shout that somehow we must accomplish our recovery by ourselves. We see asking for help or discussing feelings as an admission of weakness. We soon discover, however, that we can't stay sober alone. We need to acknowledge the importance of getting strength and guidance from others in recovery. We need to acknowledge that they know more about recovery than we do. Recovering people become the most powerful tool we have in recovery. We can use this tool in important ways. We can share our thoughts and feelings with others recovering. Still having using urges is normal and does not reflect our seriousness to stay straight. We can talk about our urges with people who've been there. We can admit that others know more than we do about recovery. We don't know all the answers. We can listen to others' stories about their recovery and learn from experiences. We often have great expectations of others and ourselves in early recovery. We're convinced that our lives will quickly change for the better. We want to get on with our lives and prove ourselves to others. We view the time spent in our addiction as wasted and wish to put the past behind us. We need to make up for lost time. People in recovery need to remember that everything happens in its own time. Recovery is a process. As addicts and alcoholics, we have a tendency to try to force the square peg into the round hole. When it doesn't fit, rather search for a more rational solution. We simply get a bigger hammer. By trying to move too fast, we create frustration and resentment because things don't go our way or happen at our pace. These feelings and our lack of perceived progress can lead us back to chemical use. Developing an attitude of patience and acceptance enables us to deal with these stressors. How do I know if I'm ready to recover? Some of us are pressured into abstinence when legal or family consequences become too severe. We may not see the role that drugs and alcohol have played in our lives and have no real intention of quitting. We comply to avoid further conflict or consequences. Some of us see that our lives are becoming increasingly chaotic and unmanageable. We're aware that something is wrong. We're willing to stop chemical use to see if our lives improve. It's of little consequence how we get to the point of considering stopping our chemical use. Most of us are not completely convinced that recovery is the answer. We hear ourselves making statements such as the following: I'm not sure I'm really that bad. I'm not like those other people. Do I want to do this? What if I try to quit and fail? Drugs and alcohol are my best friend. How will I cope without them? I don't need to abstain. I can just drink and drug less often. Isn't there an easier way to do this? I don't want to be an alcoholic or addict. Few of us are willing to accept overnight that we're addicted to alcohol or drugs. Most of us are willing to admit that we might have some type of problem with drugs or alcohol. The evidence is usually there. When we don't understand it, what we don't understand is the severity of our problem. Even if we firmly believe that others are wrong about our chemical use, we need to listen to what they're saying and continue to gain knowledge about alcohol and other drug addiction. There's no magic. A willingness to listen and to explore our chemical use is the essential part of starting recovery. We must keep an open mind. If we find we are addicted to drugs and alcohol, we're ready to do it, whatever it takes to stay sober. On a separate sheet of paper, write a personal history of the consequences of your chemical use. Identify times when you missed appointments with friends, family, or clients. How does your behavior change when you use chemicals? Identify times when you've tried to control your use and ended up using more than you planned. Be honest. How many times were your problems caused by chemicals? When have people commented on your use? Get friends and family to help. Exploring your chemical use will help you see it more clearly. Ask yourself the following questions. Am I willing to examine my use of mood-altering chemicals? Am I ready to make genuine change in my lifestyle? Do I believe that I need the help of others to stop my chemical use? If you're not sure how to answer the above questions, keep reading and try to keep an open mind. Deciding to start recovery could be the biggest decision of your life. Remember, recovery is a process. We need to be patient. Many of us may have trouble believing we're addicted to chemicals. It's important to keep an open mind. We may not see how severely our addiction has affected us. People in early recovery need to be careful of withdrawal symptoms during the detoxification period. We need to get professional help or guidance. We need to be willing to listen to what others say to us about our behavior. We need to ask others for help and guidance. Our addiction is a chronic illness that may worsen if left unchecked. Chapter 4. Understanding the recovery process. Recovery is a dynamic process. It's composed of stages that most of us will encounter in our journey. Each stage has its own development and solutions. Stages are relatively straightforward. These stages build on one another. Some require us to learn coping skills. Others reveal distractions in our journey of recovery. Our individual path is determined by the severity of our addiction and by social, environmental, and psychological factors. Before we can build a foundation for recovery, we need to do 3 things. Stop using mood-altering drugs and alcohol. Begin to develop a recovery attitude. Accept the severity of our addiction. Next to abstinence, one of the first steps in the recovery process is developing a new outlook. An attitude that fosters drug and alcohol use will not help in our quest for recovery. Stopping our chemical use is not enough. We must change ourselves. When using, we didn't fully acknowledge the effect our chemical use had on ourselves or others. We were interested only in maintaining our lifestyle. We were self-centered and blamed others for our problems. Dishonesty was deeply ingrained into our nature. We often failed to take responsibility for our actions. In recovery, we replace our self-seeking lifestyle with one of the acceptance of others and ourselves. We focus on gratitude, personal responsibility, and honesty. Our goal is to be mature and honest with ourselves and to integrate emotional and spiritual growth and healthy interactions with others. Recovery means dealing with the reality of how drugs and alcohol have affected our lives. It means changing our attitude, our approach, and our lifestyle friends, social activities, living situations, or employment. Abstinence without a program of personal growth is not likely to result in long-term recovery. Quitting drugs and alcohol may actually be easier than changing our attitude and behavior. Accepting responsibility for our behavior and making the necessary changes is difficult. We need to follow a simple plan combined with patience. The scope of the changes we need to make depends on how much damage our addiction to drugs and alcohol has caused. We need to learn some principles for developing a healthy recovery attitude. Build intimate relationships through recovery groups and recovering friends. Recognize ways of avoiding issues. Compulsive behaviors or acting out, withdrawal or isolation. Cope with emotions. Cope with urges. Euphoric recall, impaired or magical thinking. Identify high-risk situations. Create a stable lifestyle as a foundation. Stable living situation. Stable recovery support system. Stable job or daily activities. Stable relationships. Accept the severity of our addiction. Develop a recovery attitude. Decide to abstain. The letters HOW stand for honest, open, willing. The acronym reminds us of what it takes to accept responsibility for our actions so that we can stabilize our lives. Honesty is the prime factor in our journey. We need to be honest with others, but more importantly, with ourselves. Our chemical use resulted in a lifestyle based on denial and dishonesty. We need to face the extent of our addiction and its effect on others. We must approach our journey with intense purpose and honesty. Openness is one of the more challenging parts of recovery. We may fear that if others really get to know us, they will reject us. What will someone think if I tell them about who I really am and about what I'm really feeling? We may see openness as giving others an advantage over us. Well, one way to get around these fears is to start by being open with people who are in recovery. They understand. They've been there before and have the wisdom to guide us through our troubles. We can also be open to what they say. Willingness is our commitment to recovery. We need to be willing to do whatever it takes to protect our sobriety. We're still somewhat unaware of the flaws in our behavior and thinking. We listen to others for insight about ourselves and our addiction and do not dismiss their advice. We accept that others have a better perspective on us than we have on ourselves. We're willing to take an action on that advice. Our first reaction is, no one understands me. I know what I need to do. If this were true, we would have resolved our dependency long ago. In recovery, as in life, we frequently encounter problems. Some of these are unexpected and leave us overwhelmed and anxious. When this happens, we can remember that Persistence pays off. A statement from Calvin Coolidge, 13th President of the United States, can put our journey into perspective. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan "Press On" has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Persistence is an important message in recovery. Returning to chemical use or to old behaviors and thinking is not uncommon. Let's not be discouraged. We can let momentary setbacks defeat us. A common theme in recovery is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. If we need to return to our basic support system for answers in times of stress, family members, friends, and others in recovery may see our progress long before we ourselves are able to see and feel the effects of the changes we're making in our lives. Accepting the severity of our addiction. Many of us new to recovery can now see the obvious, that our drug and alcohol use cause negative consequences in our lives, but most of us have not yet realized the extent and power of our addiction. We continue to think that we'll have some degree of control over our chemicals, that our knowledge of our dependency will enable us to make rational decisions concerning our use. We forget the role of the limbic system and of our automatic emotional and memory recall in our addiction. We say to ourselves that we have wasted a lot of time with our chemical use. We feel the need to prove to our families and to ourselves that we're not the black sheep we perceive ourselves to be. Personal story. Tom is 31 years old. He has spent the past 15 years doing drugs with his friends. Most of his high school classmates have gone to college and have good jobs. His brother and sister are both attorneys. Tom completed less than a year of college before he dropped out. He has 2 months clean now. He is considering returning to college next month. He believes he has to catch up with his classmates and prove to his family that he's a competent individual. Tom's exhibiting a common thought pattern. He believes that now that he's sober, he can quickly regain lost time. It hasn't occurred to Tom that he has never developed study skills. He has never faced life without drugs and alcohol as a buffer. He doesn't yet possess the skills for independent living. Although Tom not prepared for the challenge of college, he believes that by enrolling, he's doing something positive for himself. In early recovery, we may want to put the past behind us or forget about our mistakes. We find ourselves wanting to move forward quickly. This type of thinking minimizes the true impact of our addiction has had on our lives. Addiction is not something we can now discard because we understand that we can no longer use drugs and alcohol. As a part of our new lifestyle, we begin to realize just how much we depend on chemicals. We can find ourselves quickly slipping back into old attitudes and behaviors we start to recognize that knowledge of our addiction or fear of consequences will not keep us sober. We must allow ourselves time to develop new skills and attitudes. We need to be patient. Creating a stable lifestyle as a foundation. Once we've dealt with abstinence, attitude, and acceptance, we can begin building a stable foundation. Without one, our recovery is at risk. We can divide the building of our foundation into 4 separate areas. Developing a stable living situation, building a stable recovery support system and program, stabilizing our job or daily activities, developing stable relationships. Stabilizing these areas gives us the best chance for sobriety, while we gather the essential experience, knowledge, and skills to maintain our recovery. We attempt to clean house of things that pull us back to chemical use. The less stable our foundation, the more likely we are to return to chemical use. Personal story. Lori has been caught with drugs and charged with possession of cocaine. The court has sentenced her to drug treatment program. While there, she began to see how drugs had taken over her life. She wondered how she could possibly maintain sobriety when her live-in boyfriend was a drug dealer. Much of her life centered on their relationship. He was her only means of support. She questioned how supportive her boyfriend would be of her recovery. Lori saw she needed to make major lifestyle changes if she were to stay off drugs. This thought was frightening. The changes seemed overwhelming. She wondered if there were an easier or softer way to attain sobriety. We too must make the difficult lifestyle changes. Stopping our chemical use will not be enough. We also identify specific areas that may threaten our recovery. Identifying situations that endanger our sobriety is particularly important. Emotions and thinking in early recovery are strained. We may not always make the most rational choices. We can easily place ourselves in high-risk situations. Some of us are on a recovery or treatment high. We're caught up in excitement of starting a new life and forget that we do not yet possess the skills and knowledge to cope with a high-risk situation. Wendy, this is a personal story. Wendy works as a waitress in a popular bar. Before entering treatment, she had spent most of her time with other employees after hours using drugs and alcohol. Her substance abuse counselor has questioned her about staying in this working environment now that she has chosen sobriety. Wendy had never considered that her workplace might be a high-risk situation for her. She had no concrete plan for how she would stay sober. When she returned back to work, how would she deal with the severe urges to use drugs and alcohol again? She assumed that her knowledge of her addiction would keep her out of danger. Wendy was unprepared to cope with a workplace where drug and alcohol use is common. Now, not recognizing high-risk situations is often a factor in a return to chemical use. We'll identify our high-risk situations in Chapter 6. Coping with using urges. When we first stop our chemical use, we're highly susceptible to using urges. Sometimes the urges can be especially powerful. We can develop skills and specific plans to cope with these situations. Preparing a concrete plan to handle urges gives us a tool to use when we unexpectedly encounter thoughts about drug or alcohol use. An old saying goes, if you feel like drinking, call your recovery sponsor. In reality, if we feel like drinking, we call the liquor store. Preparation is essential. We learn how to cope with using urges in Chapter 7. When we first stop our chemical use, we're highly susceptible to using urges. Sometimes the urges can be especially powerful. We can develop skills and specific plans to cope with these situations. Preparing a concrete plan to handle urges gives us a tool to use when we unexpectedly encounter thoughts about drug or alcohol use. In reality, if we feel like drinking, we call the liquor store. In the process of our recovery, we may find ourselves undergoing emotional turmoil, feeling overwhelmed. Anger, fear, resentment, shame, and grief are all common reactions to other people, places, and things. We still possess irrational thinking and behavior. We find that the destructive behaviors of our past have traumatized us and our families, friends, and co-workers. Many of us use chemicals to escape from our emotions. Our emotional growth stopped when our chemical use started. Our chemicals became an escape from reality, a stopping of our personal development. We escaped real life experiences that would have helped us form coping skills. Our emotional issues may be beyond our coping skills at this time and can easily lead us back to chemical use. We need a way to process our emotions and a philosophy to guide us through this time. This is a particularly important part of the recovery process. Compulsive activities such as gambling, working long hours, jumping into relationships, staying overly busy, keeping us from paying attention to the real issues in our lives, ourselves, and our self-defeating attitudes and behavior. We may find that we are acting crazy or obsessing over other people, places, or things. Rather than deal with our emotions and problems, we unconsciously focus on other activities. Then we don't have to deal with our emotional pain. We may also choose to withdraw or isolate ourselves from others to avoid people or issues we find uncomfortable. We stop our interactions with our recovery support system or tell everyone we're fine. This isolation and withdrawal from help is dangerous. We need to remember the saying, "My head is dangerous neighborhood to be in alone." Without contact with others, we tend to lose our sense of reality. We may construct beliefs that are untrue and that lead us back to chemical use. We tell ourselves we're all right when we're not. We must start to build intimate social relationships with other recovering people. We need to let people know what's really going on with us. We're just going to support meetings or interacting superficially with other people won't work. As we progress on our journey into recovery, we discover that we don't hold all the answers. We're not in control. We realize that for lasting recovery, we need to turn to some type of higher power for help. For some of us, our higher power may be God. Some of us ask for help from people who are wiser than we. People with more knowledge become our higher power. Whatever form our higher power takes, we need to develop a concept of who we are and how we relate to our higher power, others, and the world. Our goal is to integrate the principles of recovery into our everyday lives. In this way, our program of abstinence from alcohol and other drugs simply become part of our normal living and routine, and a means for personal growth. We realize that without an active ongoing plan for abstinence and personal growth, we'll slide back into the old habits and thinking. By developing coping skills and a stable foundation, we have started the process of making our lifestyle fit our recovery. The base provides the stabilization. We need to move on to further stabilization and development. We achieve the serenity that we've been searching for. Remember, we should never underestimate the power of our addiction. It is essential to build a firm foundation to handle the ups and downs of early recovery. Our goal is making our lifestyle fit our recovery, not making our recovery fit our lifestyle. We need to resist "I can do it myself" thinking. Asking for help can provide answers and comfort. We can use others as a resource and for measuring our progress in recovery. The how principle, being honest, open, and willing, can help us develop a healthy recovery attitude. We need to be patient in our recovery and not go too fast. We need to develop a spiritual nature. Life was not meant to be free of emotional pain. Keeping sober is the most important thing in my life. The most important decision I ever made was my decision to give up drinking. I am convinced that my whole life depends on not taking that first drink. Nothing in the world is as important to me as my own sobriety. Everything I have, my whole life, depends on that one thing. We're going to take a break and we'll come back to chapter 5.